It's 1975 in Los Gatos, California. In a local bar, you can hear the sounds of friends celebrating, others burying their sorrows, and some drinking in silence. But in all the noise and sights, there is a man of the name of Gary Dahl. Now, Gary is by all means a pretty simple man. He was born in North Dakota, he went to college, and eventually ended up becoming a copy editor, which, if you don't know what that is just the guy who reviews the text that writers produce to correct errors in grammar, punctuation, and spelling. But in regards to this story, it's mostly irrelevant. Gary is sitting down with his friends, making conversation and enjoying the night. The conversation eventually reaches the topic of pet care. It starts off casual, with them pondering how annoying it must be to have a cat meowing at the bedroom door, or a pet bird constantly making noise, or the small details of washing a dog. Maybe it was with the help of the alcohol, or a strike of creative genius, but Gary eventually thinks of a pet that would require no care, and jokingly comes up with the idea of having a pet rock. At first, it's just a joke and nothing more, which he and his friends laugh off, but after the laughter dies down, our friend Gary here decides that maybe there's more to it than just a simple laugh or two. More importantly, he sees dollar signs. So Gary gets to work and starts writing his magnum opus, a 27-page instruction manual named The Care and Training of Your Pet Rock. The instruction manual was mostly filled with puns, gags, and jokes, Gary understanding what he's selling. Eventually, Gary releases the pet rock to the public, $4 a pop for its carrying case, which doubled as packaging, and a rock. Now, to any person back then, the idea of a product like this having any form of success would be a pipe dream, but somehow the pet rock became a national sensation. Commercials, media coverage beyond belief. Gary essentially becomes a celebrity overnight, and somehow even faster becomes a millionaire, selling over 1 million pet rocks by the time February 1976 hits. This is what history remembers as a fad, or its proper definition, of objects or behaviors that achieve short-lived popularity but fade away. They're often seen as sudden, quick-spreading, and short-lived. Now, fads can be anything from diets, toys, fashion, even dance moves, but I think most of them are looked back on as cringy or stupid and are just dismissed for being an in-the-moment thing that can never really take off in the current times, and they make fun of it, when in reality we all enjoyed it in its heyday. And I want these fads to be looked at in a brighter light, because in reality they serve as mini time capsules, capturing such precise times in our culture. Also, to clarify before some guy with the username of Trump Gaming comes at my neck saying, "Angle, isn't a fad just the same thing as a trend? Also, it's not that serious, lol." There's a very distinct difference, which is mainly how long they last. Fads are short, pretty forgettable trends basically, while trends themselves last longer and usually have a grander impact in the future. You can think of a fad as essentially a micro trend. Today, I would love to go over some of the overarching stories of some of these fads and how they should be looked at upon in a more positive light and be remembered. The 1980s in general are pretty renowned for how many different fads were going on, from stuff that is still pretty iconic like the Rubik's Cube, which still stays relevant even today, and the more obscure fads that were lost to time, such as the jelly shoe, a story in which two dudes named Tony Alano and Nicholas Gillian basically flipped the fashion industry on its head by taking ugly shrimp fisherman shoes and turning them into colorful, expressive, profitable shoes, all with the help of PVC plastic. The jelly shoes would absolutely explode in popularity, with the company, the jelly shoes, growing 20 times the number of shoes they sold in just 1 year. I mean, it's essentially the precursor to the Crocs, which today is a global shoe brand. Even other high-end fashion designs have the occasional callback to the original jelly shoes. The great thing is that even though it did die out, they've recently crawled their way back into relevancy. In a Vogue 2020 article, Alexa Chung tells British Vogue that she loves them in an ironic way and that they're witty and distinctly British. I'm not sure if the British part was a compliment, but regardless, it says a lot that you can still hear something positive about these nearly 50-year-old shoes that probably lasted no longer than 4 years in their entirety, with the company stopping operation completely in 1986. I find the jelly shoe a pretty niche fad that most people wouldn't really know about, either it due to it being from 50 years ago or simply because it didn't stick around for so long. But I find the creativity and skill to just completely flip the fashion industry on its head pretty impressive. But let's switch gears to a less distant era, namely the 2010s. Now, 2010s was the boom of the internet, with the internet internet fully taking over pop culture in the way we as a society connect with one another. And because of this, there was an insane amount of fads that would follow one another like wildfire. It's probably due to the attention span of the internet as a collective being so fast. It's just remarkable how many different fads were during this decade alone. Things like just girly things, YOLO, which were born in such early stages of the internet where kind of anything could stick and become popular, and became popular fast. They kind of settled in the smallest parts of the internet like the earliest years of Tumblr and Instagram. Let's take a look at one of the first fads of the 2010s that absolutely took the world by storm: planking. The story here starts in the great old USA, in 1984 to be more precise. Two kids named Scott Amy and Joel Marshall decide one day that it'd be funny to just lie face down in the middle of a baseball game they saw while walking by. This of course being officially and historically the first time something close to planking happened. Instead it was called face dancing at the time. But the term planking wouldn't even be coined until the summer of 2008 when three guys named Sam Wickert, Darcy McCann, and Kym Berry in South Australia make a Facebook page simply named planking. After that, it slowly spread until it eventually caught wind of national attention, and it just never looked back. This was international. It was global. It was in an episode of The Office. Max Key, son of New England Prime Minister John Key, planked for the hell of it. Even Dwight Howard was in Beijing and just started to plank with 100 of his fans for an ad campaign. With all that fun, there was some more morbid stuff, like the story of Acton Beale, who died attempting to plank on his apartment balcony that was 7 stories high. He would die at the scene. At the time, people did fear this one-upmanship culture, which encouraged getting the craziest photo, and I think this moment was proof that maybe some of those fears were justified. Planking would blow up and basically die out all within the span of 2 years, which is pretty common among fads, a lifespan that climaxes and then dies out rather quickly. For some reason, it was a very common thing for fads to be associated with challenges. Most of the time, those challenges being harmless, like the iconic Harlem Shake, which involved a group of people just dancing and being absurd. And then there's fads like the infamous Tide Pod Challenge and the Cinnamon Challenge, which were insanely stupid and harmful even without the benefit of hindsight. But I think an interesting fad that follows this challenge structure is the Goldfish Challenge. This challenge being a person swallowing a live goldfish. And if you think that's weird, just wait till you hear about how this even got started. It dates back to 1963, where Lothrop Whittington Jr., a freshman at Harvard University, swallowed a live goldfish to win a $10 bet, which adjusting for inflation would be equivalent to $100 today. This was in efforts to become class president. This then, for some reason, starts a competition between multiple universities, such as Penn State, MIT, and Harvard, in attempts to surpass one another in who can swallow the most live goldfishes. They even made a professional competitive establishment named, and I kid you not, International Goldfishing Gulping Association, or IGA for short. There were only 2 rules. First, each fish had to be measured 3 inches long, and second, that the fish had to be kept down for at least 12 hours after consumption. The last champion of the goldfish swallowing would go to Joe DeLiberto, who gulped a total of 89 goldfishes. Somewhere along the line, someone finally realized the absurdity of this challenge and said that maybe it isn't okay that we are just letting people swallow goldfish for the hell of it. Thus, the Society of Preventing of Goldfish Eating was established in the spring of 1939. They even made a poem condemning the act, with it saying in quotes, "To end this paranoid prank, oh Harvard, how I wish you put the students in a tank and graduate the fish." As you can obviously tell, these 1930s college kids were absolutely outraged at people doing this. After 1940, it kind of just dies out, but the story doesn't end there. We can thank our good friend Steve-O from Jackass reintroducing this ridiculous prank to a new generation. Even though he couldn't stomach it down fully, with the goldfish coming out where it came from shortly after, it gets dubbed the Goldfish Challenge, which did bring some attention to it, but mostly just stayed within the roots of college hazing and just general college kid stupidity. Honestly, I think the most wildest thing that relates to this challenge is the story of Maxwell Taffin, who for a lack of better terms can only be described as unhinged. The story goes as this. In 2019, Max goes to visit his friend at LSU to go to a football game later that week. The next day, Max tells his friend's girlfriend, the friend that he is visiting by the way, to look in the fish tank in her room. When the girlfriend looked in the tank, her pet fish was missing. Later that same day, she received a text from our hero Max saying he found the fish, with a photo of the fish buried in his feces, captioned with the text, "Found your fish." To recap, this guy showed up to visit his friend's dorm, saw his girlfriend's fish tank, proceeded to swallow the fish, told the girl about the fish, pretended like he didn't know what happened to it, then pooped it out and sent a photo of the fish buried in his own poop. And the craziest thing is, no one knows why he did it. There was literally not one reason or even aspect of intention detailed in the news report. He just did it. He didn't get away with it though. He would be arrested and charged with cruelty to animals, improper telephone communications, and being a fugitive from justice for more than 26 months. But Max's story doesn't end so somberly. In October of 2020, the LSU goldfish incident was removed from his record, and Max could move on with his life. However, the incident could never be erased from the public eye. The final fad that I want to bring attention to today is found in a Macy's on June 17th, 2003. It seems to be filled with people just doing their regular errands, shopping, looking at clothes they won't get, killing time. But if you go up to the 9th floor, which contains the rug department of the Macy's, you would find more than 130 people gathering around an expensive rug. If an employee came to them and asked what was going on, they would simply reply that the gatherers lived together in a warehouse on the outskirts of New York, that they were shopping for a love rug, and that they made all their purchase decisions as a group. Thus, flash mobbing was born. It is defined as a group of people who assemble suddenly in a public place, perform for a brief time, then quickly disperse, often for the purposes of entertainment, satire, and artistic expression. It was coined and invented by Bill Wozik, whose original goal was to be a social experiment designed to poke fun at hipsters and to highlight the cultural atmosphere of conformity and of wanting to be an insider or part of the next big thing. But its intent would stray far away from what people would do with the idea. Once the fad reached the mainstream, people started doing full choreographed musical numbers in the middle of a building, or the most famous flash mob, Worldwide Pillow Fight Day, which is the world's largest flash mob ever. It took place on March 22nd, 2008, and over 25 cities around the globe participated in it. Even the Wall Street Journal states that more than 5,000 participated in New York alone. Word of it spread like wildfire throughout every possible social media at the time and turned out to be a complete success. The pillow fights would last from a few minutes to several hours during this flash mob. Ironically enough, the fad of flash mobbing lasted the longest out of any of the ones mentioned today, with people still doing it, the main problem being now that it just felt too commercialized and lost what made it so fun to begin with. And while many have questioned the appeal of flash mobs, for some reason a lot of people still participate in them. All in all, we've gone over the good, the bad, and the ugly side of fads, but I think each one of them brings something so unique in the story of humanity that's so overlooked. The story of the pet rock is one of a man coming from nothing and hitting the lottery with such an absurd idea that worked because of his own wit and cleverness. The jelly shoes are a story of artists who took something out of left field and managed to set a framework for high-level fashion brands and casual fashion and never saw nor were ashamed of their work, even if it was forgotten in the grander scheme of things. Planking tells a story of kids finding ways to entertain themselves and catching wildfire in one of the biggest games of one-upmanship, but also having tragedy rooted in it to remind us that we aren't invincible. Even though the story of the goldfish has some merit, it's one of stupidity and how people will do anything competitively if there is even an ounce of interest in it, and that people sometimes do certain things for a lack of reason. And with flash mobs, it tells a story of people wanting to become a part of something bigger and the extent they will go to reach that goal. It's also a story of harmless fun and how people working together to achieve a goal is nothing more than just having a fun Saturday afternoon. There are so many more fads I could go over and so many more time capsules that tell the story of a certain person or a certain thing that caught the wind of millions. But I encourage you, yes you, the person watching right now, to go look into the little parts of the history books, the odd stuff, the things that lasted a weekend but found a way into the book of human history. Trust me when I say you'll find things that may seem unbelievable, but keep reading them. Try to enjoy the smaller parts of our shared history as humans. But above all, I can guarantee that there will not be another man who will break that record of 89 goldfishes swallowed. Not a chance of that happening.